Hi everybody, this is Lars Wemmje, and welcome to my Love VFX course, in which I will talk about the creation of my fantasy short film nöck with Nuke Studio. You can find the link to my short film in the description of this video. In this lesson I will focus on the creation of shot 80, 90, and 120.
Shot 080 is the first shot of the second sequence in my short film. The first sequence plays in an apartment, and the second sequence is playing outside. It took about 3 hours to shoot the 7 shots for the sequence in the apartment. And it took around 5 hours to shoot the 26 shots for the sequence that was playing outside. But shooting it in that time frame was only possible because of the previs and the shooting plan that I carried around with me on my iPad, which told me exactly what I had to shoot and in what order I had to shoot it. Okay, so let's take a closer look at shot 080. This is where the mystery of the short film starts, because the young girl is finding herself outside in a dark environment with a lot of mist and something in the background that she's instantly focusing on. In the footage backdrop at the top, we can see the plate, the denoise plate, the grain plate, and one pre-rendered frame of shot 090, in which we can see the moonlight illuminating some parts of the background. I started this comp with clamping the highlight in her earring that you can see at the end of the shot. You could even see that highlight after the grading, which I found a bit distracting. So I created a mask for the highlight and used a clamp node to hide it that way. In the next backdrop, I cleaned up the background. I did the majority of that with frame holds, a lot of roto and roto paint nodes. The tricky thing about this part was creating a mask for the girl. There's one thing in particular in this backdrop I wanted to focus on, which helped me out a lot when it comes to creating a mask for the girl. That was building my own difference key, which starts with a color correction, a frame hold, and a merge node that is set to difference. Of course, I could have also used the difference key here, and it took me quite a few more nodes to make that custom difference key usable. But for the sections that I needed the mask for, it was absolutely good enough. In the next backdrop, I added a lot of color corrections to the shot to convert the plate from a day to a night look. But I left out one spot in the upper right corner to have a source for the God rays, which you can see in the next backdrop. I split up the God rays in 2 sections. In the first section, you can see the base of the God rays. Let me quickly go through the nodes of this backdrop so you can see how I built this up. The second part of the God rays comes with a pre-rendered frame of shot 090, which helped me to save some time in this comp. If we take a look at the input, you can see the God rays that I've already created in shot 090, to make it look like the moonlight is illuminating some parts of the background, which is mostly being color corrected, transformed, masked, and defocused at the bottom of this backdrop to make this section fit into the shot. It was originally too short, as you can see here if I disable this keymix node, but a grid warp node helped me to extend this plate and make it fit into the shot. After the God rays, I added some mist to the background with a grade node and a mask that I created with some noise nodes. And a few more nodes, as you can see here. This is the noise alpha that makes up the main texture of the mist. It's a 4K noise that is animated in the Z offset knob that I corner pinned into the perspective of the plate. Then I took a transform node, which I animated in the skew X knob, with only 2 keyframes to give the mist some movement and support the animated noise. By deliberately placing the center of this transform node in this position and animating the skew X knob this way, I'm creating sort of a fake parallax effect for the mist. After grading and blurring the alpha channel, I combined it with the alpha from the B pipe, combined it with another noise alpha, and defocused it. With the last 2 channel merge nodes that are connected to this B pipe, I stenciled out the trees in the background and the young girl in the foreground. Finally, and as usual, I added a digital zoom with a transform and a crop node to the shot, right before renoising the plate with Das Grain. If you want to find out more about this renoising setup, you can check out the previous lesson 6 of this course. And that was it for this shot. This is the transformed plate. This is the comp. And this is the graded comp. Now let's take a look at shot 090. In this shot we can see the girl's point of view. This is the moment when she's realizing that there's something interesting in the background. In the upper backdrop you can see all of the assets again, like the plate, the denoise plate, one frame of the creature from shot 130, the grain plate that I used to renoise my comp, and a noise plate that I used to remove the fixed noise pattern in my plate. I talked about this workflow in lesson 5 of this course, which is about 3D camera tracking. I also created some masks for the trees in the foreground, and rendered one frame of some tree shadows, which helped me to roughen some of the edges of the lit areas of the grass in this sequence. Because I wanted to make it look like the light was coming from the moon and not my LED light on set, but I will get to that in just a moment. Right after the footage backdrop, I cleaned up the plate with 2 roto paint nodes and a roto node. In the moonlight backdrop, I color corrected the plate to adjust the fake moonlight in the background, and then I added another color correction to make it look like that area was also illuminated by the moonlight. I roughened the edges of this mask with an image of tree shadows. To place them, I used 2 card 3D nodes, which is a convenient way to place cards in 3D space, without having the need to create a 3D scene for them. In the nöck shadow backdrop, I added the shadow of the creature to the background, with a color correct node and the blurred roto shape. Right after the shadow, I added the creature to the background. In this case, I just took one frame of the creature from shot 130 and kept it really simple when it comes to its integration. I used a masked color correction for the glowing eyes and a grade node for the integration of the creature into the plate, in which I just modified the black point and the gain knob. After the color corrections, I defocused the creature to match it to the sharpness of the plate, and then I used the transform node to scale and position the creature the right way. In the next backdrop, I used a bunch of masked color corrections to make the plate look darker. And then I added some God rays to the plate to make it look like these bright areas are being lit by the moon. Let me go through the nodes of this backdrop so you can see how I created the look of these God rays. At the bottom of this backdrop, I removed a big part of the God rays with a multiply node and a mask that I created to make them fit into the plate. And right before merging them over, I used another multiply node to make them look a bit brighter. After the God rays, and just like in shot 080, I applied some mist to the background with a mask and a grade node. Of course, it would have been awesome if I would have used recorded smoke elements or simulated smoke for this task, but I think this fake 3D mist technique with animated corner pinned and skewed noise worked just like a charm for my short film. In the next backdrop, and as usual, I tried to give this locked off shot some movement, this time with a camera shake node and a digital zoom with a transform and a crop node. I scaled up the plate before the camera shake to make sure the comp covers the frame. And finally, I renoised the comp with dust grain. Again, if you want to find out more about this renoising setup, you can check out the previous lesson 6 of this course. And that was it for this shot. This is the transformed plate. This is the comp. And this is the graded comp. Now let's take a look at the last shot of this lesson, which is shot 120. In this shot, we can see how the young girl is slowly walking towards the creature nöck. Since you are already familiar with the structure of my comps, and since I don't want to talk about workflows that I've already covered, I'm not going to talk about the footage backdrop, the color corrections that I created to make the plate appear darker, or the renoising of this comp with dust grain in this shot. For the rest of this lesson, I'm going to focus on the 3D projection technique that I used to clean up the background and add some mist to the shot. Since this is a handheld and moving shot, I had to create a 3D camera track for it. If you want to know more about my lens distortion and 3D camera tracking workflow, make sure to watch lesson 5 of this course. So let's take a look at this 3D projection setup. If you have set your ground plane correctly during your 3D camera track, just like I have shown you in lesson 5 of this course, and if the floor in your plate is even, you can create a card, rotate it so it's lying flat on your 3D grid, and project your undistorted plate on that card. That way it's easier for you to see where people or things are in 3D space. So you can decide where you want to position your custom geometry or your cards to use them for your 3D projections in Nuke, which is exactly what I did here. So after undistorting the plate, because this 3D camera is based on an undistorted version of the plate, and after I have positioned my card for a 3D projection, I have set the projection mode of my Scanline render to UV to get the image that is being projected on this card into the UV space. If we take a look at the first and the last frame of the shot, right after the scanline render, you can see that the walkway in the background, which I wanted to remove, is stabilized. And if you look at this setup in 3D again, you can see that this is sort of a 3D stabilization, brought into 2D space with the scanline render. So after I removed this walkway in the background, I extracted the section of the background that I really needed and used an Apply Material node to bring this retouched plate back into 3D space, so it can be rendered again with another scanline render node, but this time its projection mode is set to render camera. The Apply Material node works like an instance of the geometry you connect it to, which you can also retexture with the material input. And to make this rendered image fit right back over the plates, I had to reapply the lens distortion to this output, since the projected image that came into the setup had been undistorted before. But keep in mind that you need to set your scanline render up to output the right amount of overscan if the lens distortion you're applying to your rendered image is also cropping it. To add some mist to this moving shot, I used the same 3D projection setup that I have already used to clean up the background. And I have also used the same setup for the mist that I have already used in the previous shots. But instead of using a transform node that is animated in the Skew X knob, I animated the transform X and Y knobs in the transform tab of the noise node to move it just a tiny bit and incline from the top to the bottom. And I projected a mask of the young girl into the same UV space with another version of this projection setup to reuse the mask of the girl from another backdrop for the mask of the mist. Then I extracted the section that I wanted to keep, ran it through the same node setup that I have used in the previous projection setup, except for the edge blur node at the end. And that was it for this shot. This is the plate. This is the comp. And this is the graded comp. I really hope you like it. It's not a fancy shot, but I'm quite happy about how it turned out, and it definitely helped me to tell the story in my short film.
Alright, that was it for this lesson. In the next lesson, I will talk about the creation of shot 150 of my short film nöck. Feel free to post any questions you have about my work in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer all of your questions. If you want to see more of these videos, don't forget to subscribe. Again, this is Lars Wemmje. Thank you for watching, and goodbye everybody.